That one that we're really focusing on today is building up your digital identity. So, how are you thinking about what that means and how we're doing it?
Yeah. So the metaphor that I use most often here is your bedroom. And if you think about your bedroom as your own space where you feel like you can, where it feels like a sanctuary, it feels like your own little like hub with all your things. It's where you have your like closet with your clothes, your bookshelf with all your books, your vinyl collection with all like the vinyl that you've accumulated. um, it's a place where you can choose to invite people to come into the space. And if they come into the space and browse through your bookshelf and see the books that you're interested in, and maybe if it's someone that's really close, you'll like show them what's in your closet, but it's probably private. What's in your drawer next to your bed, that's probably quite private. Like that space, it speaks to your identity in many ways. And so in the piece around like your shelf, like the difference between shelf and self is like quite kind of a small gap, because the things that you accumulate, the things that you collect speak to who you are. The things that
Yeah.
you make a kind of intentional choice to purchase or to say you enjoy or to like or bookmark or collect is an indication of what you're interested in, and kind of as a derivative of that, like who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I think about it.
I got to share two quotes that stood out for me that related to this from the blog post. And the first one is, all of these represent a physical manifestation of who we are, what we are, and how we want those closest to us to perceive us. I thought that was really well said. And the second one was, self and shelf are only one letter apart. And I thought that was really, really clever.
Mm.
And I don't think that, who knows, actually, maybe the Latin definition of like shelf comes or self comes from shelf, but it made me think of that.
Mm.
And it's just interesting how we start collecting stuff. And NFTs have been really the first time personally I've started collecting.
Mm.
And I'm starting to think about what my collection says about me. It's tough too, because some of the things I wish were in my collection that I wish I had to say about me maybe are out of my price range, or just not things I own. But it's for the first time I'm really thinking about how I'm curating my digital profile versus on Facebook, I'm one person of me. On Instagram, I'm another. On LinkedIn, I'm another. And all these are separate me's, but I don't have one central hub for,
Mm.
what my self is. And so, like, when you think about collecting, and putting things on your shelf, what
Mm.
is your shelf in the Web3 world? Is it your wallet address? Or, I mean, at Unstoppable, we're thinking about Web3 identity starting with your NFT domain, because your domain name can link to multiple wallet addresses. Like, yeah, what is your Web3 shelf?
Yeah. Um, it could be your wallet. I think the abstraction of that is it's your decentralized identifier, and that could be some form of NFT domain. Um, it's it's whatever that connects to. I think in the world that I occupy and what we're working on, we think of it as that space where you are kind of making attestations. You're saying, I really enjoy this. This is an extension of who I am. Like, I'm collecting it, I'm adding my own context or take on it, and I'm bringing it into a space that as a whole, the aggregate describes me, is sort of like who I am. And if I were to kind of like take a step back a little bit and think about like, how do we construct our identities in the real world beyond just collecting in a bedroom? I use that metaphor. I think it's the things that we experience that shape us, but also the interests and tastes that we develop over time. And so, like, I grew up in a mixed household. I moved around a lot as a kid. My parents influenced me. My community influenced me. Those experiences shaped my identity, but so did the interests that I started to kind of gather over time. Like, I love music, I love writing, I've started to love coffee and coffee culture, and like those shape me. And when people think of me, they're like, oh, it's that guy who makes lists of cafes in different cities. Like, it becomes a part of who I am. And so, in that vein, like, is there a way for us to kind of aggregate the totality of who we are through our experiences online and sort of the things that we collect or the things that we're interested in and like the taste that we formed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and today it's Facebook, right? It's Facebook and the Facebook kind of like organization, everything that comes under it, where they have a view of who we are through our experiences online and like what we say we like based on how much time we spend on each piece of content or what we say we like, what we comment on, engage with. And so that view becomes who we are in many ways.
Yeah. And you definitely alluded here to how, and I mentioned it too, there's a lot of versions of us. And so,
yeah,
I mean, and you mentioned Facebook, and Facebook definitely was the first time. I mean, maybe there's other points in history, but Facebook is, in my experience, the first time I really started building out this online identity. And I want to know that it is how we start putting our identities on all these different platforms. They're disparate right now. They're disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Is it changing how we present ourselves versus when you have this shelf that you can put all your stuff on and you're not limited to the platform?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're bringing a more true self there versus who you are on Facebook and the other places that we do have some kind of form of identity around in the Web 2 world?
I think it's important that we have spaces where we can present different parts of ourselves, because we are also, we have many parts. And, I think right now the kind of like other way of thinking about it is when like me as Jad, walking into the office versus walking into a bar with my friends, I present differently, but I'm the same person in both spaces. Like I am the same, I contain the same cells and the same interests, and I'm the same identity kind of in both, but I present differently. I might dress differently. I might behave differently. I might have different conversations. I'll perform differently in those spaces. And so the same thing applies online. On Facebook, I'll perform very differently to Twitter, to my OnlyFans or whatever, and like I'll present differently in all those spaces. But at the end of the day, I am not all those separate people. I am like one kind of unit that connects them all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I feel like what we're getting to here is in Web 2, you do have different platforms and you do present differently on them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
In Web 3, you can have a central identity where all your collectibles, all your data is in one spot, and then you can bring that to the platforms where you want to present. And so the difference here is ownership, right?
Totally. You can decide to provision in data into those specific spaces. You have control over what part of you comes out, like you do in the real world.
You're listening to the Unstoppable Podcast, the go-to place for everyone to learn about the latest innovations in Web3, NFTs, and the decentralized web. Welcome to the metaverse.